La la la. Hello, Clarice. What's up, man? Alright, let's see. Alright, guys. And we are going to have have about a dozen or so tabs to read on my Google Chrome. A little bit of shit posting, a little bit of news, a little informative stuff. A little bit of ranting, guys. That's what I got going for you this morning. I'm just posting on X and then post on Blue Sky. Have some ranting. Book reading to do. Beep 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 doo. So I usually stream to 4 platforms: TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. But I'm not streaming to TikTok today because, man, they are laying the hammer down on me. My streams have just been like completely cut off, you know. It's like you have violated such and such, and it's like, dude, I was just playing video games. But it's because of past videos and past live streams. They're just clamping down, man. So I'm not gonna do that. But good morning. I woke up and got coffee, and then I was like, I'm gonna go to the track to walk. But then I was like, I'm hungry, so I went to go eat a big Mexican breakfast. I'll go work out later. So as long as I go, man, it'll be all right. So all right, let's load up my Google Chrome real quick. So I'm gonna read a few memes and just shit posts and stuff. Some news though. Then I'm gonna continue reading Santa Needs to Speak, guys. I wonder where my other book is. Well, whatever. What the hell? Fuck it. We're live. We're doing it live. All right. So let me get my Google Chrome tabs going on. So just for shits and giggles, guys, I really found this hilarious. The evolution of the trash icon. You guys remember Windows 95, 2000? One of them's Israel. I thought that was hilarious. This is a terrorist state, okay? So definitely belongs in the trash bin. Being against Zionism is not anti-Semitic. You know, Arabs are Semites too, guys. So if you are complaining that I'm being anti-Semitic, well, what do you? You're more. You should be more worried about genocide in the Arabs that are getting killed, massacred. You're anti-Semitic too, you know. Nah. Just a joke. You know, this trend was going around, guys. This whole Erica Kirk entering a room moments after watching her husband take his final breath. Because after Charlie Kirk died, she was just going all over TV, man, with crazy entrances. So I thought this was funny. Oh, man. It's so good. Fucking all this, like, explosion. That's what Erica Kirk was doing, man. She was just outrageous entrances to all these speeches and her crocodile tears and shit, man. So a little more serious. Those are just a couple of joke things I wanted to read just to lighten the mood up. But Big Nasty, great communist account, big lefty. Always consistent in her views and doesn't take any shit. I found this pretty funny. The Blue Sky Liberals. Check out this. In case you were wondering, in case you were curious about the Blue Sky Liberals, look what this person said. Fuck off. ICE was fine when we had a democracy and rule of law. Blah, 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 blah. What's wrong with you liberals, man? Like, in my 30s, I've realized that liberals are just as bad as Trumpers and people that vote Republican. You guys are the fucking worst, the worst, man. Yeah, dude. Democrats fund ICE. Don't forget that. And they hand the keys over to Trump, and they point, "Up, look what Trump's doing." And then liberals are like, you know, we warned you about Trump being elected. The repercussions that were going to happen. You should have voted. But it's like, nah, dude. Democrats, this is all going to plan, guys. And I can't believe, Democrats want a police state just as much as Republicans. So, yeah. Next tab I want to read. This is a deputy from Spain, Ion Belarra. It's a double R. I had to roll the R there. Quote, Mr. Sanchez, what is the difference between what Israel does and the Nazi gas chambers? There is none. Let's take a look.
Quemó vivas a decenas de personas en tiendas de campaña cuando estaban en un hospital refugiadas. ¿Qué diferencia hay entre esto y las cámaras de gas de los nazis? Se lo pregunto, señorías, a todos, al presidente. Ninguna diferencia. Y nosotras estamos siendo cómplices como país de este genocidio. Usted recorre el mundo hablando de un embargo de armas que ustedes son incapaces de aplicar como gobierno. El gobierno, su gobierno, ha vendido armas después del 7 de octubre. Ha comprado armas por valor de 1.000 millones de euros. 1.000 millones de euros, señorías, durante este año de genocidio. Han permitido el transporte de armas a través de nuestros puertos durante todo este año. Si se cree de verdad el embargo de armas, señor Sánchez, deje de mentir y aplíquelo de una vez. Israel.
Yeah, dude, she's on point. It's not anti-Semitic to ask to stop bombing kids, bombing innocent people. So, yeah, it's pretty much any NATO country, guys. The United States, the West, they're all involved in the logistics, importing, exporting arms to Israel. And Spain is one of them right there. So, big ups to Ion Belarra. I hope her life is safe and not being threatened. And, but yeah, man, you can call this genocide a Holocaust, but it's like, Israelis or a liberal idiot would be like, you can't say Holocaust, that's anti-Semitic. Well, that's exactly what's happening. It's a live-streamed Holocaust, and you can even say it's worse because it's been live-streamed every day in front of our faces. So, but I'm not going to get into that debate, what's worse, or, a Holocaust is a Holocaust. So, another tab I want to read here. You make that bigger. Commie Trucker, a great follow, guys. Another communist. He's very consistent in his views as well. He was posting something positive about China. China lifted 800 million people out of poverty. With policies that improve people's lives, the USSR lifted a feudal nation of illiterate peasants into a global superpower in a generation. Cuba freed a nation of slaves into a nation of world-renowned doctors. Communism works. You can see how, as years go by, China's population extreme poverty goes down. And then this idiot replies, not believing anything coming out of China should be the baseline of basic intelligence. I like this reply. I mean, you very clearly have no intelligence. And then Commie Trucker replies, in the U.S., we blacklist children's entertainers who say Gazan children shouldn't be bombed. We also axe news segments that document our concentration camps where we put ICE kidnap victims. But yeah, China is an authoritarian state. I like that. Great reply, guy. You tell him. Great job. And yeah, dude, in America, if you're black, you can get executed in broad daylight just for walking down the street. So I don't like the anti-China stuff, man. You guys need to fucking chill. It's not better in the United States. So this is a tab I opened because The Republic of Somaliland officially recognized by the State of Israel. This is from December 26th of 2025, not too long ago. The Republic of Somaliland warmly welcomes and deeply appreciates the historic and principled decision by the State of Israel to officially recognize its sovereignty and independence. And then I can't pronounce his name right, but his is Hermit Hwalring. Very outspoken. He wants a united North and South Korea. Great follow, guys. Check him out. But he says Somaliland is part of the UAE genocide logistics chain in Sudan and sits right across from Yemen. Just as Washington is aggressing Latin America to secure its backyard, I think we can expect Europe, Israel, and the Gulf to go into overdrive in Africa for resources, all with U.S. backing. So that's something to think about there, guys. Somalia is next door as well. But what kind of name is Somaliland, man? That's going to be, like a proxy state, Somaliland, for Israel and the U.S. to back right-wing extremists to, keep Syria in line, invade Iran pretty soon, I would think, and keep an eye on Gaza and all the resources. I got my Americano. Here's another tab I wanted to read from DropSite News. Really informative, guys. I trust them. Palestinian-owned sheep die after settlers poison land in Kisan, east of Bethlehem. 5 Palestinian-owned sheep died after Israeli settlers sprayed toxic pesticides on agricultural land in Kisan, east of Bethlehem, according to the Palestinian Info Center. Local sources said the sheep were grazing in the northern part of the village when they ingested contaminated grass. This incident comes amid a broader escalation of Israeli settler and military violence across the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. The Palestinian Information Center documented 7,066 Israeli violations in November 2025, including the killing of 25 Palestinians and the injury to 309 others. So, oh geez, that's can't read that. I'll probably get banned for reading that word. So, I've talked about bombing, sniping, graveyards, holes being dug and bulldozed and dug up, destruction of water wells. But then this is something. They're poisoning the freaking animals that the Palestinians rely on too. Atrocity after atrocity. So just don't stop talking about Palestine. So the next tab I want to read is from Dr. Rami Aladwan. Dr. Rami at Dr. Rami. Allianz and Aviva no longer insure Israeli weapons firm Elbit Systems after direct action. Elbit Systems is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer that produces over 80% of the drones that murdered Palestinian men, women, and children. Elbit operates on British soil, and the government buys its battle-tested weapons to use on British citizens. Shut down Elbit. So, after a sustained direct action campaign began by Palestine Action before the group was proscribed, it has been confirmed that Allianz, I can't even say it, and Aviva no longer insure Elbit Systems. So, the action taken today by Prisoners for Palestine, at which Greta Thunberg was arrested for holding a sign which read, "I support the Palestine Action prisoners, I oppose genocide," was outside Aspen Insurance, who now provide employers' liability insurance for Elbit Systems. So, guys, these are heroes, people that are doing direct action. So, that's the kind of stuff we need in the world. So, I just wanted to highlight how brave these people are, because they're going to be under constant surveillance and probably in prison for doing what they're doing. But let's take a look at this. Israel sets up tourist binoculars where you pay $1.60 to watch them destroy Gaza.
Behind me, the occupation forces are watching a film. Propaganda film about Gaza, probably. And over here, over this sunset, is Gaza. This is Gaza. Now, the most fucked up part is that they have here a telescope for you to see Gaza, for you to watch your Palestinian peers being murdered. And obviously, in a very Jewish fashion, it costs 5 shekels to use it. Families come here and let their children observe Gaza like this.
Disgusting.
Behind me, the occupation forces.
All right, I just wanted to share that. That's how sick these people are, guys. I think this is one of the last couple tablets I want to read. From December 29th, Boeing awarded $8.6 billion contract by Pentagon for 25 F-15 jets for Israel. And then Sal the Algorist, I don't agree with a lot of his stuff, but he's pretty funny. $700 for hurricane victims in North Carolina and Florida. $700 for wildfire victims in Maui. So, big business is war, guys. So, the next tab. Beyonce has officially joined Forbes billionaire list. Woo! And then this parody account, Poop Crave, because it's like a play on Pop Crave. Her road to billionaire is truly remarkable. She's opening new locations in Israel, products made by Sweatshops in India and Bangladesh, buying online fake reviews for promo. That's hilarious. So, yeah, guys, she endorsed Kamala Harris, and she didn't even perform. She made like a 30-second speech and left. Shit was hilarious, but she's a piece of shit. And, I mean, this is breaking news. Celebrities are trash, so. Just wanted to share that. Billionaire predator class. Billionaire ruling class. All right, last but not least, this is very disturbing. This account, I think it's dead serious. It really is behind AI. I don't really care. But I mean, he is pushing AI apparently, but it's like, this is so bad. It's got to be a freaking it's got to be, a parody account, but I think he's serious. Whatever. He's like, AI is soulless, I say. So, in a famous scene in 1994's The Professional, directed by Luc Besson, starring Jean Reno, Natalie Portman, and Gary Oldman. At this scene, Gary Oldman is so infuriated because they can't catch this one fucking guy. And he's like, Manny, bring me everyone. And he's like, everyone? Everyone! He wants to bring SWAT and the whole freaking precinct to this building. Very famous scene. So let's see. I don't know. I guess they typed in the bottom, make it look like a young Brad Pitt or something screaming. So let's see. Look at that. Look. That's just not right. Let's play. Oh my God, that's so disgusting. But look, he's not like, it looks like he's like barely yelling. Oh, it's so gross. Let's do it. Like, this guy does not look angry. Look how fucking angry Gary Oldman looks, dude. It's so bad. It's terrifying. I just wanted to share that. So fuck AI, guys. That's all I gotta say about that. Scary stuff. Scary stuff. Sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat today. I've been looking at this stuff. So, all right, we're gonna close all those tabs. I'm sorry if you've been typing in the chats, guys. Excuse me. I've been missing out. So, all right. Well, there goes our little mini news segment-y rant. I'm gonna have to load up a whole bunch of guys. I put all those tabs open like 2 weeks ago, and I just haven't gotten to my little mini news stream type thing. I really need to be consistent, and I really need to say days in advance in a schedule. I'm so bad at that. I should make that a New Year's resolution. Have a schedule and make thumbnails to post a week or days before. That's what I really should do. If I really want to succeed in doing this, being a streamer and content creator and all that stuff, but something to think about. Just ranting here. What is next? All right, so I have been reading Sandinista Speak, and in case I'm on page, what page am I on? I'm on page 32, I believe. So what have we learned so far? This is about how U.S. imperialism, they've installed a dictator, the Somoza dictatorship, for about 50 years. The statistics of life, like disease, literacy rates, etc., the people suffer. All the land resources goes to Somoza and his close buddies, and they let the Nicaragua be carved up by the mega transnational corporations. So the Sandinistas in 1979, very brave, they kicked out the Somoza dictatorship. So, and this is like testimonies, interviews from the Sandinistas themselves. So very cool to get like a different viewpoint, like from the people from Nicaragua themselves, from the folks that are on the side of the oppressed and not the oppressors. So I left off on, I think it was an interview with Daniel Ortega. No, this is Carlos Fonseca Amador. He was the central leader of the FSLN from 1961 to 1976. So I'm in the middle of this chapter. And this chapter is Nicaragua 0 Hour. So let's continue. Let's continue reading Sandinista Speak. Speeches, writings, and interviews with leaders of Nicaragua's revolution. This bullet point says, role of the Cuban people's struggle and revolutionary victories. The principal characteristic of the period from the assassination of Sandino in 1934. Sandino was a Nicaraguan revolutionary leader. Continue. Until the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959 was the interruption of the traditional armed struggle as a systematic tactic to fight the ruling regime. Another main characteristic was the almost total domination that the conservative sector exerted over the anti-Somozist opposition. That was the situation, lasting for 25 years, that preceded the new stage, which began with the armed struggle of the Cuban people and their victorious revolution. There were a few exceptions to that long pacifistic period, but these were almost always insignificant actions by the conservative sector, behind the backs of and against the people. In April 1954, an armed coup was foiled, which, although under conservative hegemony, involved elements that had revolutionary inclinations. The attitude of these revolutionary elements, along with the action of the patriot Rigoberto López Pérez, who gave his life in bringing Anastasio Somoza G to justice on September 21st, 1956, must be viewed as precursory events to the insurrectional stage that developed several years later. The Cuban People's Rebellion had an influence even before its victorious outcome. Thus, in October 1958, there was the guerrilla action in which the leader, the veteran Sandinista Roman Raudales, was killed. There were a whole series of armed actions against the reactionary government. This is a lot. Bijao River, November 62. The Coco River and Bouquet River in 63. Clash between peasants and local authorities in 65. In the Ulos region of Matagalpa. Economic actions against banks in 66. Actions in Managua, January 67. Incursions in Pancasan in 66 and 67. economic bank action in Managua, and certain revolutionary executions in some areas of the countryside in 1963. Battle with the National Guard in Owasca, Matagalpa, February 69. In some encounters, especially in the first months of the new stage, elements linked to the traditional capitalist parties were influential in the leadership of these actions. But in general, these efforts increasingly revealed the determination of the revolutionary sector to take up arms to win the country's liberation. The period of gestation of the current revolutionary armed struggle has lasted almost 10 years, and this length of time is clearly a result of the characteristics of the revolutionary movement that have been explained. The next bullet point says, the rise of revolutionary armed organization. Especially in the first years of the new stage, the revolutionary leadership was obliged to take up arms with leaders who often lacked the political conviction needed to lead the struggle for national liberation. As the process has developed, these leaders have been replaced by comrades who possess a profound conviction and an unbreakable determination to defend the people arms in hand. Another very prominent aspect of the first period of the new stage was the lack of an adequate revolutionary organization linked to the broad masses of the people, and especially to the peasants. Milk Dinam replies in the chat, says, horror no, I'm reading a book about Nicaraguan history. It should be noted that the composition of what could be called the revolutionary groups was primarily made up of artisans and workers with a very low political and ideological level. At the time, revolutionary militants with a university student background were an exception. Students fell in different actions, but each group as such lacked the numbers needed to enable it to play a very important part in assimilating the experiences that the individual students were acquiring. The revolutionary groups lacked cadres who had the ability to solve the difficult problems that the situation posed. One aspect that is worth looking at regarding the work that has been done over the last decade is that no one knew how to combine underground activity with work among the popular masses. In general, importance has been given only to underground activity, although after the defeat at the Bouquet River in 63 and the Coco River between 64 and 66, the air was committed of interrupting insurrectional work in order to pay attention to work among the masses. It must be pointed out that for a period of time, more precisely up to 62, each individual armed action came from a different group. That is, they reflected the total anarchy that the insurrectional revolutionary sector suffered from. The FSLN marked the overcoming of that problem, providing the sector with its political and military instrument. Between 59 and 62, some of the components of the FSLN retained the illusion that it was possible to accomplish a change in the pacifistic line of the leadership of the Nicaraguan Socialist Party. In the year 1962, this illusion was dissolved in practice with the establishment of the Sandinista Front as an independent grouping, although for some time to come the idea was maintained that it was possible to arrive at specific unity with the Socialist Party, something which reality has refuted. The movement that culminated at the Coco River and the Bouquet River was the first action prepared by a more or less homogeneous revolutionary group. This first attempt was like a dry run for the revolutionary sector. This first defeat led to a position marked with a reformist streak. It is true that armed struggle was not renounced, and the conviction remained that this form of struggle would decide the unfolding of the Nicaraguan Revolution. But the reality was that for some time, the practical work of continuing the preparations for armed struggle was interrupted. It is also true that after the 63 defeat, our movement was seriously splintered. but we did not know how to adequately overcome the internal crisis that developed. One factor that undoubtedly influenced the deviation was that our armed defeat coincided with a downturn in the anti-Somoza movement in Nicaragua. In 1963, the political ascent initiated by the struggle and victory of the Cuban people was interrupted. The basis for the downturn was that in February of 63, the Somozaist clique successfully carried out the maneuver of holding an electoral farce to impose the puppet René Schick. In any case, although this downturn in the general situation took place, the FSLN leadership did not fully understand this to be no more than a partial phenomenon, inasmuch as the direction of the revolutionary movement was fundamentally toward progress and in transition toward maturity. It was correct in that period to pass over to rebuilding the insurrectional organization and accumulating new forces with which to relaunch the armed struggle. But this goal naturally demanded an uninterrupted maintenance of a series of insurrectional type tasks, accumulating material resources, training combatants, carrying out certain armed actions appropriate to the strategic defense stage, etc. This deviation in tactics was also expressed in the ideology that the Sandinista Front adopted. Although it raised the banner of anti-imperialism and the emancipation of the exploited classes, the Front facilitated in putting forward a clearly Marxist-Leninist ideology. The attitude that the traditional Marxist-Leninist sector had maintained in the Nicaraguan people's struggle contributed to this vacillation. As has been stated, this sector in practice has openly played the game of the Somozaist clique. This factor, together with the ideological backwardness prevailing in the revolutionary sector of the country, led to facilitation in adopting an ideology that on the national level was rooted in compromise. It can be said that at that time there was a lack of clear understanding that it was only a question of time before the youth and people of Nicaragua would begin to distinguish between the false Marxists and the true Marxists. Consequently, in the years 1964 and 65, practically all the emphasis was put on open work, which included legal work among the masses. Clandestine tasks were carried out, above all in the countryside, but the main emphasis of the work during that time was legal. Reality showed that legal work carried out in that manner did not serve to accumulate forces, and that the progress achieved was minimal. Neither can it be overlooked that the legal work through the now disappeared Republican Mobilization Group, the student movement, and peasant movement suffered from lack of discipline, audacity, and organization. One must also conclude that revolutionary work, whether it be public, legal, or clandestine, cannot be advanced in an accelerated way if the armed revolutionary force is lacking. It was the lack of such a force that determined the extreme limitations of the legal work carried out in the years 1964 to 65. Our experience shows that the armed revolutionary force, urban and rural, is the motor force of the revolutionary movement in Nicaragua. The armed struggle is the only thing that can inspire the revolutionary combatant in Nicaragua to carry out the tasks decided on by the revolutionary leadership, whether they be armed or of any other revolutionary character. Parenthetically, during the years 1964 to 65, important contact with the peasant sector was developed. Comrades of urban extraction permanently established themselves in areas situated on both ends of the northern region of the country, and made trips to learn the peasants' problems firsthand and organize the revolutionary struggle in the countryside. It must be said, however, that full advantage was not taken of the broad contact that was established with the peasants. In the countryside, some mass peasant meetings were held, some peasant delegations were sent to the city to expose the problems of the countryside. The peasants occupied some lands, challenging the violence of the big landlords. However, an accelerated pace of peasant mobilization was not maintained, Contact was preserved at specific points and was not extended to other places, where the peasants suffered terrible living and working conditions. In addition, if the few peasant marches to the city had been organized with more audacious methods, a much larger number of peasants would have participated, and at the same time a greater number of areas would have gone into action. In various places, individual contact with certain peasants was prolonged for too long a time without proceeding to the mobilization of the peasant masses. Land invasions by the peasants who had been dispossessed were hardly ever carried out. The lack of both adequately developed leading cadres and the necessary determination to organize the struggle of the popular masses played a decisive role in the fact that we did not fully utilize the possibilities that were presented. Lacking guerrilla camps, it was impossible to train cadres to organize the struggle of the diverse sectors of the Nicaraguan people. One second, let me just make sure. Cool. For some reason, I'm not. Hold on, I just want to make sure I'm still streaming. Does it say I'm still streaming, guys? Hold on. Okay, I'm sorry. Just because... I got an email saying my stream is over. I don't know. I'm sorry. Let's continue reading. My mistake. All right. The next bullet point, guys. Let me drink some coffee. Whew. Okay. It says I'm still streaming on Twitch and YouTube, but I got an email just now saying my stream ended. This has been happening a lot. I'm sorry. Okay. In the court, and this is titled, this bullet point, The Armed Movement of Pancasan. Sorry if I butchered that. In the course of 1966, practical steps were taken to relaunch armed actions. That year, the Sandinista front became conscious of the deviation that had occurred as a result of the blows of 1963, and it proceeded to prepare for the Panascan guerrilla base. Although this preparation showed organizational progress compared with the FSLN's armed movement in 1963, it did not represent serious progress in political and military tactics. It was a notable step forward organizationally because it did not follow the usual practice of preparing the armed movement in a neighboring country, which had provided distance from the enemy's observation. Rather, it was preparation of an armed movement in mountains situated in the very center of the country. An extremely important factor that hindered the success of the Pancasan movement was the mistaken method used to get the peasants to participate in the struggle. The form used was to recruit a number of peasants to become part of the regular column. This means that these peasants were completely mixed in with the working class and student fighters, i.e. combatants with the urban background. Okay, that makes sense. The militants who came from urban areas generally possessed a higher revolutionary consciousness than the peasants as a whole, who became demoralized when faced with the first difficulties that we ran up against: scarcity of supplies, certain slow marches, and the first rumors of the presence of enemy soldiers on nearby roads. This obligated the leadership to send back the majority of the peasants, although there were honorable exceptions of peasants who firmly refused to be let go, and who are an example of the combative possibility of the sector. In addition, in the first stage of the Revolutionary War that was beginning, we did not find a way to incorporate the peasants in those areas some days distant. with whom contact had previously been established through organizing them in the struggle for land and for other demands. Some of the peasants who temporarily joined the guerrillas had been moved from their areas to the encampments. When the breakup of the Pankasan guerrilla movement had already taken place, it became known that once some of the peasants who had deserted the guerrillas arrived back in their own areas, they took part in armed assaults on local government posts or rural commercial establishments, as well as executions of known informers. This indicates that to a large extent, some of the peasants who had become demoralized went through that crisis because they were not organized in the most appropriate manner. It means that they probably should have been irregular rather than regular guerrillas. This experience leads us to think about the possibility of organizing irregular guerrillas parallel to the regulars. We should not fail to point out that we can now evaluate the importance of work among the peasants much better thanks to our own experience. We don't only base ourselves on the experiences of other Latin American guerrilla movements. Another aspect that must be highlighted was the insufficient number of cadres to handle all the tasks that the preparation of the work demanded, not only in the city and the countryside, but even outside the country. For too long, the leadership of the Sandinista Front tolerated sectarianism, which stood in the way of promoting a sufficient quantity of new cadres coming from politically advanced working class backgrounds and from the university sector. Feverish attempts were made to achieve excessively big goals instead of always making progress in carrying out suitable everyday tasks. The insurrectionary work was not related to the general people's struggle, especially the peasant, student, working class struggles. It was good that the front put its principal emphasis on insurrectionary work, but it was an error to abandon other revolutionary forms of struggle. Sectarian tactics weighed heavily, and these determined the course of activity and the preparation for the movement in the mountains. The individualistic, bad habits that leadership comrades often displayed was the factor that helped hold back the initiatives that could have resolved many problems. On different occasions, individual problems were mixed with political problems. This may have decisively contributed to depriving certain initiatives of the seriousness that was due them. In regard to placing cadres in charge of various tasks, it was a mistake to be confident that comrades who had not experienced the privations of guerrilla life would be able to work among the masses. For example, among the student masses. For some years now, our organization has been conscious of the ballast that the Nicaraguan revolutionary movement carries as a result of the stance of the capitalist parties, which for many years usurped the leadership of the anti-Somozist opposition. However, at the time when the guerrilla base was established in the mountains, there was insufficient thought given to the fact that due to the prevailing conditions, the tasks required by the work in the cities could not be attended to by militants who did not possess the necessary firmness and discipline. In view of this, the comrades in the forefront of urban resistance work could count on the practical collaboration of a very reduced number of militants. The situation of the urban resistance became more acute due to the sectarian attitude of those charged with this responsibility. Organized massed work, student, peasant, and worker, was paralyzed. On the one hand, there were not enough cadres to handle this work, and on the other, there was an underestimation of the importance this activity could play in the development of the armed struggle. This weakness led to the situation where, when the death of comrades in the mountains and in the cities was recorded, there was not consistent solidarity on the part of all the members of the front. Oh my God. Sorry. All right. In the cities, only violent actions of an individual nature were planned. and there was no attempt to develop a policy of using violence involving the participation of the popular masses in the cities, something that is possible mainly in Managua, the country's capital, which has a population of more than 300,000. Under Nicaraguan conditions, as well as in most countries of Latin America, the center of action of the Revolutionary War has to be the countryside. However, the cities must also play a role of particular importance, given that in the first stage of the war, the city has to supply the countryside with the most developed cadres to lead the political and military detachment. In general, the revolutionary elements from the cities have a greater ability to develop themselves in the first stage. These elements are composed of the revolutionary sector of workers, students, and a certain layer of the petty bourgeoisie. One must take into account the habits that the capitalist parties and their faithful servants have imposed on the popular masses through their electoral policy. These parties have conditioned broad sectors of the people to participate in the hustle and bustle of electoral rigmarole. Never heard of that. This circumstance must be taken into account to fully understand why many sectors of the population, despite their sympathy with the revolutionary armed struggle, cannot demonstrate that sympathy through action. This forces us to consider the need to fully train a broad number of persons from among the population to have the material capacity to support the armed struggle. To seek out the people is not sufficient. They have to be trained to participate in the Revolutionary War. All right. The next bullet point says, some current task. Several months ago, work in the countryside was reestablished. The FSLN is simultaneously developing political and military work, with the objective of reorganizing the guerrilla struggle. In the countryside, a study of the peasants' problems is already underway. In this investigation has required militants to stay in the rural zones for several weeks. Militants with an urban background, workers and students, are participating in this political work. It has been said that the mountain, the guerrilla base, proletarianizes, and we agree with this statement. But as our experience has shown, it can be added that the countryside, political contact with the peasants, also proletarianizes. The urban militant in contact with the countryside, including the zones where a guerrilla base is not organized, lives the abject poverty that the peasants suffer and feels their desire to struggle. A phenomenon that has been seen in this country since the Pancasán movement is the growth of the Sandinista National Liberation Front's political authority over the broad sectors of the popular masses. Today, the Sandinista Front can claim, and has obtained, a much greater degree of cooperation from the population than in the past. It must also be said that if we do not get greater cooperation than we are actually receiving, it is because we lack cadres who are competent in asking for this type of help, and also because the cadres now active are not functioning systematically enough. Simultaneously, new methods are being found so that we can gain the practical collaboration of new sectors of the population in the clandestine conditions under which we function. A small country with small cities. This has led us to not depend exclusively on the old militants and collaborators, a large portion of whom are jaded, quote, unquote. Furthermore, we have reestablished squads that are prepared to act in the cities, and they have carried out some actions. We now have plans to undertake actions in harmony with the period of reestablishment we are now going through. The Sandinista National Liberation Front believes, at the present time and for a certain period to come, Nicaragua will be going through a stage in which a radical political force will be developing its specific characteristics. Consequently, at the current time, it is necessary for us to strongly emphasize that our major objective is the socialist revolution, a revolution that aims to defeat Yankee imperialism and its local agents, false oppositionists, and false revolutionaries. This propaganda, with the firm backing of armed action, will permit the front to win the support of a sector of the popular masses that is conscious of the profound nature of the struggle we are carrying out. In order to outline a strategy for the revolutionary movement, it is necessary to take into account the strength that the capitalist parties represent, due to the influence they still wield within the opposition. One must be alert to the danger that the reactionary force in the opposition to the Somoza regime could climb on the back of the revolutionary insurrection. The revolutionary movement has a dual goal. On the one hand, to overthrow the criminal and traitorous clique that has usurped the power for so many years, and on the other, to prevent the capitalist opposition, a proven submission to Yankee imperialism, from taking advantage of the situation which the guerrilla struggle has unleashed in grabbing power. In the task of barring the way to the traitorous capitalist forces, a revolutionary political and military force rooted in the broad sectors of the people has a unique role to play. Seeking these roots is dependent on the organization's ability to drive out the liberal and conservative influences from this broad sector. The policy we follow later on regarding the old parties that now have a capitalist leadership will be determined by the attitude that the people as a whole have toward these parties. Relating to the situation of the Nicaraguan Socialist Party, it can be stated that the changes that have taken place in that political organization's leadership are purely changes in form. The old leadership builds illusions regarding the conservative sector and calls for building a political front in which these stubborn agents of imperialism participate. The so-called new leadership currently justifies having participated in the electoral farce of 1967, supporting the pseudo-oppositional candidacy of the conservative politician Fernando Aguero. Like the old leadership, the so-called new leadership keeps talking about the armed struggle, while in practice it concentrates its energies on petty legal work. The above statements do not contradict the possibility of developing a certain unity with the anti-Somoza sector in general, but this is unity at the base, with the most honest sectors of the various anti-Somoza tendencies. This is all the more possible due to the increase in the prestige of the Sandinista National Liberation Front and the discrediting and splintering of the leadership of the capitalist parties and the like. The Sandinista National Liberation Front understands how hard the guerrilla road is, but is not prepared to retreat. We know that we are confronting a bloody, reactionary armed force like the National Guard, the ferocious GN, which maintains intact the practices of cruelty that were inculcated in it by its creator, the U.S. Marines. Bombardment of villages, cutting of children's throats, violation of women, burning huts with peasants inside of them, mutilation as a torture. These were the study courses that the U.S. professors of civilization taught the GN during the period of the guerrilla resistance, 1927 to 32, led by Augusto Cesar Sandino. The frustration that followed the period of the Sandinista resistance does not have to be repeated today. Now the times are different. The current days are not like those in which Sandino and his guerrilla brothers battled alone against the Yankee Empire. Today, revolutionaries of all the subjugated countries are rising up or preparing to go into the battle against the empire of the dollar. At the apex of this battle is indomitable Vietnam, which, with its example of heroism, is pulsing the aggression of the blonde beast. The combative example of our fallen brothers carries us forward. It is the example of Casimiro Sotelo, Danilo Rosales, Jorge Navarro, Francisco Buitrago, Silvio Mayorga, Otto Casco, Modesto Duarte, Robert Amaya, Edmundo Perez, Hugo Medina, René Carrion, Rigoberto Cruz, Fermín Díaz, Celine Chible, Ernesto Fernandez, Oscar Flores, Felipe Gaitan, Fausto Garcia, Elias Moncada, Francisco Moreno, Carlos Reina, David Tejada, Carlos Tinoco, Francisco Cordoba, Faustino Ruiz, Bonerges Santa Maria, y Ivan Sanchez. We will faithfully fulfill our oath. Before the image of Augusto Cesar Sandino and Ernesto Che Guevara, before the memory of the heroes and martyrs of Nicaragua, Latin America, and humanity as a whole, before history, I place my hand on the black and red flag that signifies free homeland or death, and I swear to defend the national honor with arms in hand, and to fight for the redemption of the oppressed and exploited in Nicaragua and the world. If I fulfill this oath, the freedom of Nicaragua and all the peoples will be the reward. If I betray this oath, death and disgrace and dishonor will be my punishment. End quote. There we go, guys. That was that chapter of Sandinista Speak that was titled Nicaragua 0 Hour. Next is page 43. The title of this is Nothing Will Hold Back Our Struggle for Liberation by Daniel Ortega. He's one of the guys on the cover there. Just a little preview. This speech by FSLN leader Daniel Ortega was delivered to the plenary session of the 6th Summit Conference of Non-Aligned Countries held in Havana, September 3rd, 1979. Ortega is coordinator of Nicaragua's Junta of National Reconstruction. The translation is by Intercontinental Press. All right, cool, man. Man, it took me... reading a book on stream is tough, man. My throat gives out. It's tired. I get sleepy. Oh, shit. Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, man. All right. 10:37. All right, I'm going to stop the stream here, guys. I'm currently playing Resident Evil 1 Remake. I'm a big Resident Evil fan. Love survival horror. And I think I'm halfway through Jill Valentine's run, so I'm going to stream that later today if you guys are interested. And I'm going to practice more trombone, guys. I bought this, it's called Silent Brass. It's like, it makes the trombone super quiet. And you can put earphones in so you can hear it better. Because I downsized and I live in a condo. I just don't want to piss off my neighbors, you know. So I'm really happy about this. I can practice to my heart's content, you know, and not be insecure or something. So I need to do a movie stream. I'm really behind on movie reviews, so maybe I'll do one later today, okay? But I wish everyone a good one for now. Stay tuned.